Hello everyone, I wanted to make a video for all of you talking about my experience with DPDR. I had really bad depersonalization and derealization for the better part of about 4 years on and off, especially when my OCD became chronic. Once my OCD became chronic, it took about 3 months for my DPDR to become a very, very big problem. And then once it became a problem, it basically stuck around for a long time, for the better part of my entire recovery, which is stories that we hear every single time when people come in after taking edibles or something like that, and they go into a DPDR state. It's much more than just edibles or anything like that. It's also just anyone going through OCD and anxiety recovery and everything that's along with DPDR and all the mistakes that people make with DPDR, which is a lot. There's a lot of mistakes that people make, especially surrounding trying to get rid of it. That's definitely a big one. We're going to talk all about that, and definitely that most of the advice that you're going to hear surrounding DPDR is unfortunately incorrect. It's very hard to understand how DPDR operates unless you've experienced it for long periods of time. And most people have not, thankfully, because it's not an easy thing to go through by any means whatsoever. So before going any further, please subscribe, hit that like button down below, look for that direct WhatsApp link per usual. And yeah, then we'll see how things are going. If you want to come in, I could teach you how, and Rob, me, whoever you want to work with. We've all had DPDR to some degree. Usually most people who have chronic OCD, your nerves are so sensitized that you just develop DPDR without even knowing it. It's almost like you're just, as Rob says, you're just looking through this foggy glass window for so many years that you just become accustomed to that, and you think that's the normal, almost your normal vision, which it's not. You're definitely in that hazy DPDR state. Some people have it worse than others, especially if there's an existential solipsism fear, the fear of being in a vat or a robot, the fear of being in something like The Matrix or the movie Inception, being already dead. There's different variations to those fears that will have to be broken down, etc., etc. But this video is going to be strictly about the sensation itself. So before I started suffering chronically, which was about almost 5 years ago, 2021, 22, 23, 24, almost 5 years ago was when my chronic OCD started. I had anxiety before that and definitely had compulsive behaviors. No one goes from no OCD at all and no compulsive behaviors to just chronic OCD. That's not really a reality. What happens is the individual has a bunch of compulsive behaviors, and sorry, I just was looking at an awesome car go by. If you heard that, it sounded amazing. That's an ADHD moment for you right there. So before that, lots of anxiety, but no real chronic mechanism where it was latched 24/7 the way how my DPDR became once I became chronically stuck. So once my OCD became chronic, which was June of 2019, I believe, because I had just left the pool. That's when I woke up in the middle of the night and I had the tinnitus. And that's kind of what started the chronic OCD cycle, and then all the compulsions behind that. I didn't really have DPDR at that time, but after like 2 months of not sleeping, I mean, I would be lucky if I slept an hour at a shot because I was so scared of my sensations and so scared of the ringing in my ears. That's when my DPDR became extremely chronic. And basically I lived in this almost like, I also had a big fear of visual snow for a while. I remember hearing and watching a video on visual snow. Visual snow is more than likely just a symptom of anxiety. It's not a disorder the way that most people think. When someone's locked on to the fears of visual snow, what tends to happen is that person becomes extremely scared of noticing visual snow. Like, I remember watching this guy, actually I've never talked about this. I remember watching this guy on YouTube talking about his tracking metrics of visual snow. And he was so compulsive that I don't even think he realized what he was doing. And he was very intelligent. And he like correlated this chart to his stress levels with his visual snow. That all has to go. That is absolutely compulsive. I remember at the time being like, wow, this guy's really on top of it. Like, even if mine was like his, I could have all these tracking metrics. Tracking metrics in life are very problematic. That goes way beyond just tracking DPDR. Like, if you're tracking like stuff in your relationship, how people are, can be very conditional. If you're tracking your gym routines and your progress, that's more than likely has to go. Tracking, for most people, whether they have OCD or not, stops them from living. It gives the sense of control, which gives them a happy sensation, but it's like being in a prison cell and you just got a stake. You're still in a prison cell. You're still trapped. Even though you have those moments of happiness, you're still in a prison cell. And that's what happens when you track all these metrics. And it's not just DPDR, but that was a very interesting thing about visual snow. And I watched that. Now looking back on that, I haven't thought about that in like 4 years because I was still in grad school. So, end of 2019. But yeah, that's a very bad problem for us. So once the DPDR became chronic, I basically lived in this, what we like to call the underwater fishbowl, where basically, like, if I was looking at this street, the same walk I do a lot of my videos on, it wouldn't be like me looking out through the world. It would be me kind of underneath this like smoggy, smoky fishbowl with like a extreme depth perception problem, to where you could be 3 feet away from me having a conversation with me, but it felt like you were 1,000 miles away from me in my mind. So, and anyone who has extreme DPDR knows what that feels like. And it's not just the way it makes you look. It's not your visual cues. It's also the way it makes you feel. The visual cues are disturbing, but it's the disconnection in the mind to where, like, and this is something that's very difficult for people to understand who have never had it. But like when my DPDR was at the height, mixed with all the other symptoms, it's just an anxiety symptom. But you do have to break down the fear of noticing it if you do have that DPDR as a primary fear surrounding disconnection. And then there could be the fear of losing control, because you're like, well, I don't care about anything because I'm disconnected. So what if I lose control and harm someone? But when you're stuck in that state, I always would say it could be as almost if I could watch a family in front of me be murdered and feel nothing. Now, saying that on the video doesn't, like, people are like, wow, I can't believe, when I say a lot of stuff like this, people say, I can't believe you would say that. What if someone judges you? It doesn't matter what anyone judges you. Anyone who has severe chronic anxiety and OCD knows exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not trying to help non-sufferers. I could help them, but they're actually usually even more, people think that non-sufferers are easy, not to get off track, this is actually an important point. People think non-sufferers are easy to work with. They're not. They're not, because they don't understand that because they don't have any emotional suffering, they're like, there's nothing wrong with my life. I'm like, oh, there's a lot of things wrong with your life, my friend. You have a lot of problematic behaviors. You have a lot of compulsive behaviors, not in the way that we have where it drives a disorder, but it's still putting your life, they're still living in a prison. The thing is, we know we're in a prison because of the emotional suffering. They don't know they're in a prison. That's even worse. So it depends on how you look at it. Depends on how you frame it in your belief systems. But that's how it felt. It felt like I could watch a family in front of me get completely taken out, mafia style, and I wouldn't even shed a tear because I was so disconnected from the world. And it was almost impossible for me to feel emotions. I was in this very, like, my whole persona was just this. Like, I had nothing. There was no emotion, no happiness, no sadness, constant state of like a depressive low. It was like a microphone that's been turned down, just very like this. And for a long time, I actually didn't even work on that because I was too busy working on the other things, such as my saliva swallowing sensations, my blinking sensations, all my other sensory motor sensations, my body dysmorphia, to where the last thing I actually cared about was trying to get better from my DPDR, which was a problem because as I started to get better from sensory motor, as I started to make more progress with my body dysmorphia, my DPDR didn't move at all. It actually stayed pretty much locked in the background for long periods of time. It wasn't until I realized that the belief system that was fueling the DPDR was actually the number one thing I had to work on. Same thing with anyone that has DPDR. It won't be able to be left the way how most people say. So a lot of people, if you watch videos on DPDR, they'll talk about that you can leave the sensation there in the background to play out as needed. But that's not the case. Most people cannot leave DPDR to be present. There's a belief system that's based around conditional life acceptance, that if they experience DPDR or loss of connection for the rest of their life is ruined. And that's the main thing that drives it. And then there's all sorts of other compulsive behaviors based around that they'll do, whether it's Googling or Reddit or trying to find short-term ways to get out of their DPDR. That's not going to work. You're going to have to feel the DPDR in full blast. Now, there's many ways that DPDR comes on. A lot of people will have a bad trip. That's a big way for DPDR to come on. Work with numerous people who have taken high dosages of psilocybin or mushrooms and then developed really bad DPDR. There's many people that have talked about this, different celebrities that have said they've taken edibles or had bad trips, and then they've never really left this DPDR state, because once the DPDR state is locked, the only way to get out of it is to change your belief system. You have to wear it, and change your belief system. More than likely, the DPDR will not go away on its own. And even when it does go away on its own, if you don't look at the beliefs, it will just come back. It's like when I've made this mistake numerous times, we all have, where people are like, I'm recovered, my belief systems are sound. But then when I sit them down and I talk to them and I hear other things they say, maybe they have really rigid, you see people, if you don't have an eye for it, people don't think that this is correlated. They will have like a really rigid belief on politics or money or religion. I already know they're not recovered. Your OCD will not allow you to recover until you have an open-minded, unconditional self-life, other acceptance on every single major belief system that you hold. And people are scared about that because then they feel overwhelmed and they feel like you're not going to be able to get everything. But it is important to say that because that is the truth. So if you sit down with me and you say something like, oh, you know, I think I have a very good perspective on my DPDR, but then you're talking to me about your boss and you're talking about really rigid black and white terms about how you would kill him. Oh, I'd kill that motherfucker, et cetera, et cetera. You're not recovered. I put my whole life on it. I know because I did that. You know, I was like, oh yeah, I'm really recovered from sensory motor OCD, which I had great peace with saliva and swallowing and blinking sensations, but I certainly wasn't recovered. I certainly wasn't anywhere near where I thought, especially where I am today, which is light years than where I was even 2 years ago, which was 2 years after I met Rob, kind of in that halfway point, because I've known Rob for coming up, what was it, 20, 21, 22, 23? Well, I've known Rob for about four and a half years. That's an unfortunate thing, right? Huh? Jeez, my life sucks. No, Rob's great. But it's the truth, though, and that's the number one thing that people are doing with that DPDR. So leaving it there to play out and wearing it everywhere for the rest of your life is the most important behavioral thing if it has to happen. So I tell people all the time, could I live with DPDR for the rest of my life? I could certainly do that. I wouldn't like it. I don't want to live with it for the rest of my life, but I could if needed. And that is really the primary perspective. And that perspective didn't shift overnight. That was a perspective that took a long time to shift. A long, long time. Hilarious. That's so funny. Just cruising on these scooters. I love it. Just take one of them. I just trip it. I just grab it. I'm like, hey, can you hold my camera? I just take their scooter and drive away. They're like, what the fuck? Oh man, that's hilarious. Do you want to hear about my video with DPDR? They're like, what's that? I'm like, it's this really cool state where you're like stuck in this like disconnection, fear of loss of consciousness. The kids are like, yeah, we're gonna go home now. They go home, they're like, there's a crazy kid in the street talking about disconnection to society. They're like, yeah, don't go near that kid. Oh, is it the kid with the leather jacket that walks around the block every single day to do YouTube videos? Oh yeah, we hear that kid. Don't go anywhere near him. He's nuts. That's basically me just playing out a scenario in your head. You know what's funny too? When you have OCD and you're stuck in some sort of a doom loop like that, that's actually how the mechanisms go in the mind. When you start playing all this stuff out in your mind where you're like, you think that you can play out a scenario to decrease the possibility of it happening, that's where self-reassurance comes in. So playing out those mental roadmaps and going through the chutes and ladders in your mind where you're like, oh, okay, well, statistically, any time statistically or logically, you know it's not going to go anywhere good. But people will say, and I did this, well, statistically and logically, I've been fine with my DPDR before, and like I've been able to start a business, or I've become an accountant, or I've had kids. And then it just fires back at you and just says, yeah, but you're still afraid of me being there for the rest of your life. So your logic and statistics don't particularly matter that much to me, which is true in many regards. You have been able to wear it, but the thing is, until you develop more unconditional life acceptance of it never going away, it's very, very difficult for it to go away. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Practically, there's nothing you need to do outside of wear it everywhere and get very, very, very comfortable with it. Usually much more comfortable than you think as you slowly chip away at that belief of it being there forever. And then once you do that, that's when great things start to happen, etc. But remember, if you're working on DPDR for the primary perspective of never noticing your DPDR ever again, the chances of your DPDR lifting is very, very low, because I hear this all the time. I'm wearing it. Again, every mistake I made, I'm trying to teach you. I'm wearing it. Why is it not gone? It's because you're working on recovery to force it away. It's not how this works. It works very different. OCD recovery and the philosophical perspectives needed for OCD recovery are very, very different than anything else that you've ever done in your life. Because most things we've all done in our lives are very conditional. So that's how it goes. You like how I've been looking? So like I was so funny. This is a fun video. So like I was like making videos and just like walking through streets, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't do that. I should probably watch where I'm going, which is hilarious because I wouldn't do that at all. I just would like walk through streets because I'd be so deep in the video. It's like, oh, Nick got hit by a car. Oh my God, what happened? I don't know. Last thing I heard was the depersonalization from eating an edible, and then boom, car hit him. So hope you guys enjoy. Let me know what you think. Look for the WhatsApp link down below, and then we'll talk soon. Have a good one, everyone.